morning. For those of you who might be in North America, hello. But good evening to, I'm sure, everybody else on this call. Hi, Nick. How are you?
I'm good. It's not even Friday and I get to see you again.
I
What an
know.
exciting day.
I'm excited for today's topic, aren't you? This is
Always.
always. This is going to be so much fun. So let me pull this up. I think we can all see this really quick. Good on a screen share. Olga, let me know if we are not okay.
Everything is okay.
Okay, sweet. Nick, do you know what happened this morning? Do you know what I woke up to this morning in my inbox? It's a hard one.
Greatest pet peeve ever, or like greatest fear of LinkedIn?
Yes, it's definitely the greatest fear ever on LinkedIn. I had a pitch. I had a pitch. Actually, I think I had two different ones in my inbox, and they weren't. I have to say, like, they weren't all that well formulated. They weren't attention grabbers. They didn't really, get me going in any stretch of the imagination. And I think it's such a testament to like where LinkedIn is today, where people do a lot of connect and pitches, or if you register to attend this event, there might be some vendors who are messaging you off of this event to try and get your attention. That was one of them this morning. It happens all the time. So we're going to talk about how not to do that and maybe how to still book meetings without ever pitching on LinkedIn. Did you have anything I didn't know, Nick?
Well, everyone listening today, the reason why we're going over this is how you tackle the US and Canadian market, because it's getting inundated with connect and pitches. And so we realized that we had to change things up in order to make it work. And so this is your cheat sheet. This is your fast track to getting into the US market. And we're going to make it fun.
We're definitely going to make it fun. If you've never seen our faces before, we do live shows every Friday on LinkedIn. So you can expect a similar vibe here this morning. Even if the title of this session is a keynote, we're just here to have a little bit of fun. And basically the way we're going to talk about today is the title of the conference. It's about social selling. But the way we approach social selling is a little bit different than others. And I think it's important to clarify those differences, yeah? So the way that we see most people tackle social selling is on the left. 90% content, 10% engagement. And I would call that a content creator instead of a social seller. And yes, it's semantic, but it's actually important for what we're talking about today. So content is great. It's super important, but social selling doesn't stop there. And actually most of us can do more on LinkedIn than just create content and do some minimal engagement. Right, Nick? Like this right chart shows a different path.
Yeah. And this is the left-hand side is what I hear all the time is, I would love to start social selling with my team, but it takes too long. We can't just sit there and post content all day and wait.
Yeah.
That's not social selling. That's demand gen marketing. Social selling is right in the middle. And it's a mix of all the right activities. And at the end of the day, it's getting those conversations, those meaningful conversations that move the dial.
So on the right here, we see social selling is a mix of comments and conversations and content, and yes, dangerously outreach. But outreach isn't pitching in the way, and we'll talk about what this looks like near the end of the session today. It's a mix of all of these things. But I have to say, because we work with B2B sales teams all the time, and especially in the tech companies, and they make some mistakes. One mistake being they have no focus on how consistent they are. And actually the previous keynote was discussing this, right? That you can't just post or comment or do content, et cetera, just for one day only. Sorry, guys, I learned my mic was a little bit hot. We're going to make sure that I'm not so spicy. Okay. Consistency is where things take off. And you heard all of that previously in the previous keynote. We call that random acts of social. You're just here, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit here, And it's like, and then we wonder, why aren't we generating results, right? Well, of course, this is random acts of social. The second mistake is that there's a lack of focus. So you're commenting, you're having conversations, you're doing outreach, but there's no focus to it. And actually, you and I have both felt this. We felt overwhelmed by the number of conversations that are happening. And the reason that happens, it can happen anyway, but most of the time it's because we're having too many conversations with too many people and we don't have enough focus about where we're putting our social selling efforts. And then lastly, which was brought up as well in the previous session, is that you do outreach too soon. And this is an honest mistake. If you're a seller, we're trained to do outreach, right? We're trained to call, we're trained to email. So it makes sense to pitch, it makes sense to DM. We want that direct response. But honestly, the outreach component needs to be a small percentage of your overall efforts. And we'll talk about what that looks like. And it needs to be focused. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about prospecting first, and then we're going to talk about a couple prospecting plans, 2 different ones. And that's because actually one of the things that Nick gets told a lot from salespeople, which is understandable, is how can I get results? Especially in the North American market or US and Canadian market. Like, how can I get short-term results and how can I get long-term results? So we're going to talk about that. But first, your favorite question, Nick.
Ooh, what's the difference between a prospect and a suspect? I wish there was a chat here so that people could go and jump into this, but I want you to ask you guys, think about it. What is the difference between a prospect and a suspect? And think about your lists. Why are they on the list? If there isn't a trigger, if there isn't a bigger reason, something that's timely to put them on their list, they're just a suspect. And Morgan, what's a prospect then?
Maybe somebody who clears a bar, or there's a reason to have them on a list. Just shooting in the dark here for a second.
And this is kind of that tip of the iceberg. We'll dive into this a lot deeper and add a lot of clarity of what a prospect really is today. So that way it really guides your social selling so that it is not random acts of social, so that you are focused on the right conversations and warming up accounts. So that way the conversations are going somewhere and you're not just talking to somebody for 2 weeks for fun. Although you can do that in your own spare time, like no harm, no foul.
We have a lot of fun conversations.
But when you're trying to generate pipeline, this is a good thing to know. You have suspects. This is why you're hitting them with the connect and pitch, because you don't actually know why they're on the list. You're assuming. Prospects are validated and on that list for a reason. And we'll jump into that.
So we wanted to provide some structure to prospecting. We wanted to provide a set of tools that you can use to clarify the prospects on your list versus the suspects. And I'll say this, and then I'll let Nick take this. Usually what we see is when companies don't use these 3 T's, they get really low connection rates, they get extremely low booking rates, and they have a lot of noise. They have a lot of activity without any results. And so usually over the course of 60 to 90 days, the sales teams get really frustrated, and sales managers especially get really frustrated with all of the time and energy put into LinkedIn. But that's because everyone's going after suspects, this big ocean of people, the millions of people out on LinkedIn, instead of a nice, highly targeted, triggered, timed list. So Nick, what are the 3 T's?
Yeah, so think about this morning. You sat down, and of course, you're at this wonderful conference. But if you were sitting down to go and prospect, what would be the targeting that puts people on your list? I'm guessing you're going to say industries, guessing you're going to say geographies, maybe a little bit of headcount, and of course, the golden funding. But that's where most people stop. And then they start their outreach. They'll craft their messaging. But targeting is all about what are those minimum requirements to see value from your product or service. So we got to go a little further. Do they need to have a certain role in-house? Can they not have a role in-house? Or does that exclude you? Do they need to have a certain department? They need to have a certain headcount in a department. Like, ooh, when marketing has this many, then there's new problems that come up.
Mm-hmm.
And do they need to have certain technologies? Because your integrations are certain companies just a bad fit because of the technology that they use. And so that is the bare minimum to go and create your TAM. And now when you have the total addressable market, this is where we go the step further. This is what creates the dynamics of this prospecting that makes you look like a hero to your customers, that really allows you to step in and be that guide that delivers value from day one, because there's also triggers, there's events. And so with these triggers, so we go back to targeting, you've actually identified all your TAM, you have the ICP and the persona, and you've got all your exclusions. So now they're qualified. Now you're going to events. What has to happen?
And not events like these. Sorry, events like things that are happening in the world.
Or heuristics, those mental shortcuts that make you top of mind, or that make good enough, because we've all heard it talking to customers, good enough. What I'm doing is good enough. What makes it not good enough? What makes good enough too expensive? And so there's 5 main ones that we use all the time with our customers. And there's ratios, rates, rank, raises, and recruiting. There's many others that you can use as well, but think about these ratios. So relative to the market, are they low, medium, or high? So what is it telling you if they have 50 salespeople, but only have 1 marketer? Could they be a sales-driven organization? So what could that do to the growth of their business and to your target persona? Why would you want to reach out to them? What could they be missing? What objective that's top of mind this quarter could you go and speak to just knowing that? Rates. Oh, Morgan, I just saw that, you've hired 12 people in the past month when you've only hired 1 in the past 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time when companies go and hire that quickly, it becomes really hard to train and enable in a way that is meaningful. And then it actually causes retention issues and you don't hit your goals. We help, and then you can go and add your social proof, and then you can add your curious statement, because you want to judge or gauge their curiosity or their interest before you ask for a meeting. Rank. How do they rank? Hey, Morgan, I just went and looked at you guys' company profile, and you have the highest LinkedIn posting of all the teams we've seen. Over 50% of your team is posting actively on LinkedIn. That's unreal. How did you do that? Mm-hmm. But notice that all of these are coming back to a conversation starter. Raises. It's not more money, more problems, as Jordan Crawford likes to say. Mm-hmm. It's what changes with the money, what changes around that time when they raise the money between a series A, B, C. What is going on in that company that changes the way they operate, that changes the jobs to be done, that something from the past customers you've worked with that would be unbelievable to them. And then recruiting. Hey, I saw you just hired a sales enablement person, your first hire. And then you can go and say, offer resources, you can dive into that. But the thing about these triggers, it's like breaking an arm or a leg or getting a bad scratch or something that hurts, because these are all problems with pain, is there's an expiry date. Because those triggers, those events, those heuristics, those mental shortcuts, we forget them quickly. They're not top of mind for long. And so really, you only got about 90 days, 60 to 90 days before they're gone. This is why we have to refresh our lists with the 3 T's and add your triggers as campaigns and have a timestamp of when you created that list, because 90 days and it's gone.
So what Nick is pointing to is this can inform your entire sales development motion, obviously. it can be your whole thing. However, if you set up these 3 T's effectively, you are able to target all of your social selling efforts out on LinkedIn to accounts and leads that are hot, and there might be a little exception to that. So let's look at a comparison here. So in traditional sales, all of your time and energy is put, or most of your time and energy is put into outreach, which is on the left here, your customer outreach. And that is, you're reaching out to new customers who maybe qualify, maybe don't. Then you're investing some time and energy into your follow-up sequences, your tracking, maybe it's automated, maybe it's manual. And then you spend the least amount of energy into qualifying those accounts. So you have this pyramid that is created in traditional sales motions. And when you translate this into LinkedIn or into social selling, you keep to this pyramid, you're going to do a lot of connect and pitches. You're going to do some follow-up. And I would not recommend an automation sequencer anymore since LinkedIn cracks down hard on those. And you spend a little bit of time qualifying them once they've expressed interest. So what Nick is pointing to in using the 3 T's is you actually invert the pyramid. And I have to sneeze 1 second. Maybe it'll come. Excuse me. Sorry.
Well done.
Thank you. Social selling starts with your targeting. It starts with warming up accounts that meet your targeting criteria. And then it goes to triggered accounts. These accounts that meet the triggers, the 5 R's that Nick laid out previously. And you can focus your efforts to those triggered accounts. Because obviously that's where some quick wins might be if you articulate your messaging properly. And then lastly, you have direct outreach. But as you see the size here, actually most of your energy and attention is focused on warming up accounts. It's in this big bucket of warmed up accounts. And then the smallest amount of energy is you're doing direct outreach. And that's because social selling allows us to reach all of these accounts that we want to warm up. It allows us to reach all of the folks who meet our basic targeting so then we can build trust with them, so we can create credibility with them, so we can create rapport with them before they hit one of our triggers, before they enter further down the pyramid, which is, shall we say, magical, actually. No other platform allows you to do this, right?
And it's kind of where the social of social selling comes in. Because if we actually look at the traditional sales or we look at the direct outreach, that's selling on social. That's not social selling. The social selling comes in when we start earning trust at scale. When we start getting people to recognize our names and becoming a resource, not just a point of sale. And that's where the warmed up accounts comes in. And the triggered accounts is a great way to identify those people, to warm them up. Think of like cold calling. Who would you rather call in the morning? Would you rather go and cold call the people you've never talked to? Or would you rather continue the conversation with the people that you know will pick up, that already know they need your help? That's why the pyramid is upside down. Mm-hmm. That's why we spend the most time on warmed up accounts. They want to talk to you and they know they need you.
Absolutely. So what we're going to spend the rest of our time together today is going through 2 different prospecting plans. And basically what we're assuming here is that you've done your 3 T's. And that means that you're targeting your efforts, you have some triggers, and you're looking at timing for all of the different accounts that you're going for. One plan we've affectionately just called low-hanging fruit, and this is where you generate some short-term results. But the other are strategic conversations, and that's where you can generate long-term results. So I have a quick story. One of the things we hear often from B2B sales teams, and this comes back to the first chart we showed you, is that LinkedIn takes too long, or social selling takes too long to actually generate any results. And this is a fine myth, right? And I understand where it comes from, because what you're saying, I'm supposed to comment and post content and that's going to book me meetings. Like, sure, Morgan, sure, Nick. Like, yeah. And I get it. But so this SDR, the sales rep, reached out to Nick. This is a couple months ago. And he said, I like what you're teaching, but again, I think it's going to take too long. And so Nick said,
this story.
Nick said, bet, basically. Like, sure, I'll take you up on that bet. And gave him some guidance and said, look for these kinds, for your industry, look for these kinds of accounts. Look for, here are your 3 T's, basically. Go out and just comment. Don't do content, don't do DMs, no what, just comment. And after 17 minutes of commenting, he got a DM from one of his target accounts that said, I'd like to have a meeting with you.
He even included the screenshot in the DM too.
So this is the low-hanging fruit box, obviously, right? When you do this right, you can get in front of your target accounts in a way at the right time with the right sort of message and generate quick results. Is 17 minutes a benchmark? No, definitely not. It's more like a world record, okay? It was awesome. It was great to see sort of validation of the things that we ourselves had experienced, but obviously for a sales rep who was selling a very different product. And what this shows is that when you are using the 3 T's properly, you are not doing random acts of social. You're not just one day doing something and then not doing anything for 3 months. You're engaging consistently. You have a lot of focus, right? You're focused on the right accounts. And you're not doing outreach too soon because you're actually using all of the tools available at your disposal, particularly comments and DMs, to get in front of them. So let's jump into the low-hanging fruit, shall we?
Let's do it.
Cool. So prospecting plan 1 is the low-hanging fruit. And I'll talk about the image in a second. But this plan answers the question, how do I justify my time investment on LinkedIn? And it's possible that you yourself are not asking this question, and maybe your sales manager or your sales director is, okay? And honestly, you can spend as much time as you want every day on LinkedIn, but chances are you probably have other things to do, right? Like you have you probably have emails to make or you have calls to do. And when the DMs or the notification things start going crazy, and on top of it, if you have a SalesNav license and then you have all your notifications inside SalesNav, it can get kind of overwhelming. So you may need to start justifying your time investment on LinkedIn. And so if you set up your 3 T's, right, you do your prospecting efforts right, you create your targeted and triggered and timed lists, you are going to find accounts that sound like Princess Leia in Star Wars. And that account is saying, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. And now, the other way you could say this is like a boy who cried wolf, or basically it's somebody who's saying, help. I need help. Now, they may not use the language that your marketing department would like them to use, okay? They're probably not going to be asking for cutting edge integration services. That's not what they're posting about or what they're commenting on. They're probably asking questions, or they're like, hey, has anybody figured out how to solve problem X? But they're going to sound a lot like Princess Leia. They're going to say, I'm in trouble and I need some help, okay? So this is actually how that sales rep found quick success. Was he went out and found the accounts that were the product he sold helped basically get inbound leads to a meeting quicker. And it's a very cool product. We like it a lot. However, he found the accounts that were talking about, how do I get, I'm having problems with getting my sales leads to convert, basically. So they weren't actually talking about the exact product, but it was like, how do I get my lead who's interested to actually convert to a meeting? Bridging that like MQL, the marketing qualified lead, to the sales qualified lead, somebody who I could do discovery with. And so he went out and found those Princess Leia accounts. This low-hanging fruit is everywhere, but it's also probably only 1 to 3, maybe 5% of your total prospect list. It's not going to be a large chunk. And again, if you think about that inverted pyramid, a lot of your activity is actually not going to be focused on Princess Leia accounts. It's going to be focused on warming up accounts that aren't in their Princess Leia stage yet. Anything that you wanted to add here, Nick? I know we have a couple other examples.
They say that on LinkedIn, 90% of people are watching, 9% of people engage, and less than 1% of people are posting. The thing is, the people that are posting about a problem know there's something wrong with their workflow, their jobs to be done, and they're saying, hey, I noticed this issue. How do I fix it? They're asking for help. They've mentally made the note that I need to change. The reason why this is such great low-hanging fruit is because LinkedIn loves comments. They didn't actually put a limit on them, unlike other things. There's a reason.
Yep.
But the thing is, when you start commenting on this low-hanging fruit, it's like the kid in class that raised their hand and asked the question that everybody wanted answered, but were too afraid or too nervous to put up their hand and ask themselves. And so all the lurkers, all the people that want to go and have that answer are going to chime into the comments. And there, you may not get the meeting with the person that you were actually talking to. You might get a meeting from the 3 to 5 people that had the exact same question, that were in a decision maker role, that didn't want to go and put themselves out there not knowing. So this is really powerful, even beyond just the conversation. And LinkedIn rewards you for it.
Mm-hmm. Your favorite tactic, Nick, is to find existing conversations that are going on. So we're sort of, if you think about your top priority of low-hanging fruit are finding accounts that meet your prospecting criteria that are saying help, or they're posting about it, they're commenting about it. They clearly have some need, some desire for what you have to offer, and it's a small percentage. But the way that you start entering new conversations is you start finding them. And this is the magic of LinkedIn. There are millions of conversations going on the platform. So what we're doing here in this little screen cat is a Boolean search, which is just a fancy way of saying you want to search for the exact match phrase. So if I wanted to find the exact match phrase social selling, I would search like this with the quotes around it. And then what you can do is, instead of sorting by top match in your search bar, this is no sales nav required. Top match is LinkedIn's own algorithm of people in your network and people in your network engaging, and it's some sort of random mixture of posts that it thinks you'll like. You can sort by latest. And there's other filters you can do here. You can do from author, you can do from industry, you can do by date posted, et cetera, et cetera. And you can find the conversations that are currently ongoing using a tool like this. And what do you do with those conversations, Nick?
You join them. And the thing that's really nice is, think of this like the iceberg effect. People throw high level conversations. They don't instantly dive to level 3, but they're opening the door for you to take it there. So you can actually start your discovery in the comments. So what is that next layer question? Hey, I'm having a really hard time booking consistent meetings. Yeah, like I was there too. What are you using for outreach right now? Or like, there's different ways to go and start that conversation, but you need to continue it. The last thing you want to do though is throw a pitch in there right away, because it kills the conversation, because they, even though they know they have a problem, we haven't got there yet. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Do we bring in the vampire now, or do we wait till later?
We can, what's our third one? It's actually really funny. Our third one today. Yes, let's bring in the vampire now, Nick. You should bring in the vampire.
So one of the if you want to play a fun game with LinkedIn, is don't pitch. Don't ask for a meeting. Try to ask good enough questions, big enough questions, deep enough questions that they ask you, so what do you do? Or, hey, can we go and book a meeting? But you have to live by vampire sales. So what is vampire sales? Well, why, by folklore, vampires weren't allowed into your home unless they were invited. So what we need to do is we need to stop pitching until we're invited, because if we take this mentality, we just focus on having really great conversations, and really great conversations that dive deeper, that earn trust, that get to a root problem, book meetings by themselves. Long live the vampire.
Long live the vampire. And The third one, which sort of ties all this low-hanging fruit together, is if you take Carola's advice from our previous session and you start posting content and you're building some stuff, you're going to find people who constantly engage. And basically, they're raising their hand. They're saying, me, 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 me. Basically, pay attention to me. But also, if you set up your 3 T's well, you can discern whether it might be worth having a follow-on conversation or continuing to engage with them in the comments, because these are the small percentage, as Nick said earlier, who are active on the platform and aren't just passively consuming. So they're more likely to log on every day. They're more likely to respond to your comments. They're more likely to respond to your DMs. They want to build their network out on LinkedIn. Even though 90% of people are passive engagers, those 90%, by the way, are going to see your comments. If you're entering existing conversations and you're finding your Princess Leia's and you're posting your content, we get this surprising number of DMs from people saying, I love your content, and they've never engaged. We've never seen their name before. And that's why it's powerful. That's why content can be and is important, along with comments. But low-hanging fruit are people who jump into the conversation and want to learn more from you, right? Like they're like, hey, let's have a conversation.
And these are the people too. If you look at how they use LinkedIn, like Morgan was talking about earlier, it's their primary communication channel. A lot of the time they will answer a DM or a comment before they'll pick up the phone or send an email. So when speed is key, they're the ones that LinkedIn is the best fit for. So why not use them? Why not leverage that? Why not build those relationships? Because they're the spreaders of the information. They're the ones that they're like the news outlets. They pick it up and then they're sharing it, or they're recommending it to a friend, or they're commenting someone in. And this is how you see people that go from like only getting 5 to 10 engagements, like likes. All of a sudden they're getting a couple hundred.
Yeah.
Because of this.
It's because of this. So, obviously, we promised a second prospecting plan, which is about strategic conversations. But before we get into that, I want to clarify something. And this comes back to vampire sales, the rule that Nick articulated earlier. And I made a mistake of not including this graphic today. Sorry, folks. We have a thing at the end that you can view this graphic. But in traditional sales, from first contact to close, there's some midpoint in which that person enters pipeline, okay? And this is in your CRM. They're going to enter your pipeline. And usually when you're doing emailing and calling, the time from first contact to qualified pipeline, not close, is actually pretty short. It's one phone call away, it's one email away, it's one meeting away. That doesn't mean your first call is going to get you there. It may still take you 30 to 60 days to actually get them qualified. But in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty short. What happens, of course, is then from qualification to close is a long time, depending upon your deal cycle. And this depends on your industry and your product and all the rest of it. So it can be short if you have a really quick product, or if you're product-led, you're following a product-led movement, that can actually be pretty quick. But for a lot of traditional B2B sales, pipeline is pretty long. Social selling, and what we're about to advocate for and what we've been hinting to, extends the time from first touch to qualification. Okay, so the mistake that we see people make in following either any of these prospecting plans is they treat every single conversation as if that person is a lead. And so they're trying so desperately to pitch them. Now that's where vampire sales comes in, right? We so want to get somebody to just get them on a meeting, right? We just want to drop that comment. We just want to drop that DM that says, have a meeting with me. I want to sell you because you're probably the right fit. If you follow vampire sales and you never pitch, and you always just have good, meaningful conversations, you ask insightful questions, you offer insight on your own, you're building trust and rapport and credibility. All of that is going to extend the time from first touch to qualified pipeline. It's much longer than your traditional sales movement. However, there's a trade-off, and it's a very positive trade-off. The time between qualified deal and close is a lot shorter. And that's because you've done all of your work up front. You've done all of your work up front. So as we enter into this strategic conversations prospecting plan, looking at long-term results, keep that in mind. We're not looking for quick wins. We're not looking to try and pitch people immediately because we know that we can build trust and credibility on the front end to have a much shorter deal cycle on the back end. And in traditional sales or marketing lingo, we would say that the outbound lead has transformed into a high intent inbound lead. Okay, if you really wanted something formal here. Basically, through your social selling efforts, you're translating people into high intent inbound leads through strategic conversations. Do you want to jump into this?
The way I like to explain it is instead of us doing the unscalable one-to-one and really trying to hustle, that whole hustle culture thing, we are helping people in a way that's easy to go put out there and do it at scale. So that we're earning trust, but we're helping them buy the suit so they come to us when they're ready to get it tailored. And this is why it moves so fast, is we're giving them the right content. We're giving them the right comments to go and build champions so that when they're coming to us, it's, okay, I'm ready, but I need to go to the board, or I need to go to the buying committee, or I need to go and tell my peers, can you help me? Yes. Yes, I can.
Yes, I can. So step one of strategic conversations, the key question that you're asking in this prospecting plan is, how do I reach key accounts in 90 days or less? And if you stick to Vampire Sales, you're really asking, how can I get key accounts to book a meeting with me in 90 days or less? And all of the low-hanging fruit stuff is fairly manual, right? You're manually searching for conversations. You're manually looking for Princess Leia's. You're writing comments. You're creating content. You're engaging. But as you move into the longer first touch to qualified pipeline and you're thinking about 90-day timelines instead of 15 to 30-day timelines, you can't do all that work manually. So what should you do, Nick?
This is when you allow your list building to build itself. And so we're using Google Alerts. We're using Sales Nav the way it was designed to pull in that information, using Boolean searches with Google Alerts, using Sales Nav. Sales Nav, one thing that a lot of people don't know is once you build those account lists and turn them into lead lists, when you go on the home page, you can sort by leads and it shows you all of their content. But we got to take this a step further and we got to go and step into their shoes. And if you haven't done this before and you're not sure how, look at job descriptions. What are they being judged on? Because usually job descriptions are pain and gain. What is the company's pain and gain? What are they investing in to get? And so we're setting up our dynamic prospecting on the 3 T's. So it's like, okay, who's raising their Series B? Who just hired this role? Whose sales department just grew by 50 to 100%? By knowing these, we can set it up so that our lists are automatically populating. And so we can go and we never have to go and spend time researching because it's already there. Now we just go and look at, okay, so they have this trigger, they have this pain, they may not know it's there. So how do I get into that account? How do I route in 90 days or less so that they ask me for a meeting? What would they need to know? Who would need to know I exist? Is it 5 people? Is it 2 people? Who? Why? What are their roles? And this is kind of that design thinking of being really creative. And then also thinking of, so what does their inbox normally look like? What's their phone calls normally sound like? How do I sound different to show that I know, like a Sam Sales, show me that you know me, but in a way that's fun? Anybody ever received a meme in their DMs?
I have. Those are the best conversations. What you're pointing to as well, which is a little hack, and today we're not talking about Sales Nav. We've talked about Sales Nav previously, and if you want more content, shoot us a DM. We'd love to share. One thing you can do is you can set up a saved search based on all of the filters that you used to create your list based on your 3 T's. And every so often, that list is going to update. And Sales Nav notifies you that there are new accounts or there are new leads added to your saved search. And so you can go in and monitor them, but that's all done automatically for you. So now the time that you're spending every day looks a lot like what you're doing on your low-hanging fruit category, but it's powered by dynamic prospecting, an automated stack where you're seeing and getting notifications about what different accounts are doing in the industries or ICPs that you need to target, which frees up your time as a seller immensely just by leveraging a couple simple tools.
And now you just dive into those conversations and start warming up those accounts so that when you have that relationship, like we talked about before, when you ask for a meeting, you've earned the right to, or they're going to ask you.
Or they're going to ask you. So dynamic prospecting obviously is not where a strategic conversation starts and ends. There's actually 3 things you need to be doing to warm up accounts. We call these the 3 C's. Okay, content, comments, and conversations, or convos. We shortened it here. If you think about the inverted pyramid again, most of your time and attention should be spent here. Okay? Your dynamic prospecting is going to warn you or help illustrate you and help you figure out what are the triggers, what's the timing, when should I do outreach, when should I focus my efforts. But most of your effort and attention in the strategic conversations prospecting plan is thinking about, for my base level targeting, how am I warming up those accounts? And so there's 3 ways to do that. There's content, there's comments, and there's conversations. So content is straightforward. We've heard about that all of today, and it's the thing that gets talked about most with social selling. There's so many tips and tricks to build great content. We have our own set, of course. That alone could take up the hour today on how we think to do it properly. But basically, you want to be taking the insights you're gathering from your dynamic prospecting and from the conversations you're listening into on your low-hanging fruit prospecting plan and turning that into useful and meaningful content. Because if you think about this as like a multi-layered or multi-stacked strategy, if you're connecting with people and not pitching them, or you're entering new conversations, people are going to follow you. They're going to want to connect with you. And so if you have set up the whole thing in your 3 T's, that's your big box, that you're reaching the right kinds of accounts based on these methods, you want to produce stuff for those accounts that's meaningful for them and that warms them up. And warming them up is just another way of saying building trust with them. So instead of waiting for them to be qualified to build trust with them while they're in pipeline, to clarify your value, to talk about how you're a great company, or whatever else you do to try and close the sale, you're actually doing that before they're qualified. You're doing that, warming them up through your content. We've talked extensively about comments today, the second of the 3 C's. So you're jumping into conversations. There's a few different tips here. One, of course, is the low-hanging fruit strategy, which is existing conversations. The second thing is to look at influencers. So in your industry, there are probably a few people who have large followings. Now on LinkedIn, in some communities, it sort of skews towards MarTech, sales tech, depending upon your region of the world. But even if you're in a more niche industry, there's probably a couple of accounts that a lot of your prospects have heard of or follow. And if you think about 90% of people being passive scrollers on LinkedIn, they're not liking, they're not engaging, you start with the 5% who do. So you find your prospect accounts that are active, and you look at the accounts that they're engaging with, and you create a short list after looking at 10 to 20 accounts that you're trying to prospect. You create a short list of the accounts that they follow, they like, they comment on, and you see, should I engage with this person? Do they have a community in the comments? Do they have engagement? So even though you have the whole existing conversations thing, that's like one half, the other half can be finding influencers on the platform. And I should clarify, not Gary Vee for the record, not like that tier. We're not talking millions of followers.
Not celebrity status.
Yeah, not celebrity status. We're thinking like 5,000-ish followers to 10,000. I mean, of course it could be more, but probably somebody who posts often and has some engagement. And then jump into their comments, because as the passive scrollers are looking, if they're looking, they're looking at the comments. They're like, I wonder what this, I wonder what they say. I wonder what's happening here. And you see that pop up in your feed. You see somebody else has commented. And then lastly, conversations. This is the tricky one, and the one that we as salespeople mess up all the time. The point of conversations is not to pitch them. And if you obey the vampire sales rule, you'll never pitch them. You're genuinely trying to have a good conversation. You're trying to understand where they're at. And I will tell you, having worked with, as we've worked with and talked with a lot of salespeople, they are always extremely surprised when we never pitch. They're like, oh, aren't you going to pitch me? Or like, don't you have something to offer? And we're like, no, like, we're just here to have conversations. That's vampire sales, by the way. And we're just here to have good conversations. So that means good questions. That means curiosity, a genuine interest. It means doing just a dash of research on key profiles that you want to have conversations with. And those translate from comments and content. People reach out to you, or maybe you have a back and forth, right? Nick, what's the rule that we talk about with comments before translating into conversations?
The rule of 3.
Another 3. Sorry, folks. We're just...
And it's 3 round trips. So if Morgan put out a really great post that got my attention through triggers or search, I would go into his and I would just start a conversation in the comments. When we hit the 3rd comment round trip, me, Morgan, then I have the right to move it to DM. So I can set a connection request, and I can either use the connection request to reference the comments to keep that conversation flowing into the DMs, or you can just send it blank and then continue the conversation to the DMs, because they know you're not trying to pitch them. They know that you're carrying this conversation. And that's why we wait to 3, because it's not normal for someone to wait for 3. They see that it's genuine.
Mm-hmm. Like, we genuinely want to have a conversation with you. And you can also leave it blank if you want. But if you're coming hot off of a comment thread, I would personalize the invite and include what you would have said in your 4th comment in the connection request and continue the conversation in the DMs.
Just before we switch, Morgan.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for influencers and you're not sure where to look, where do they go to get their information? What trade shows are they going to, or conferences? Who speaks at those conferences? Like this one. Mm-hmm. And then what you can actually do is, once you've identified 3 to 5, go to their profiles, see if they're active, if that's their primary platform. And then if they are, look at people also viewed on the top right of their profile, and it'll show you where people are going as well. Because birds of a feather flock together, you'll get to double down with a little bit of research, so it goes a lot further. And then you hit the bell on them, and now you're getting those alerts automatically to jump into those conversations in your time block, right? Because you're not just jumping on LinkedIn randomly all throughout the day.
All right, 3rd one in the strategic conversations category. Nick, do you want to, before we get to this image, which is a funny image and I'll explain, do you want to talk about on my time versus just in time outreach?
And this goes back to why change, why now, and the 3 T's of triggers and timing. And so on my time, I'm just calling suspects on my time. They're on my list. I'm just calling them. Is there a reason for me to call them? Yeah, well, it's on my time. But just in time outreach is when you know something bad is happening. It's like that foreshadowing in the movie, and you're like, how do they not see they're walking into a trap? What is going on? And this is the trigger, but because we built up this pattern recognition, we've worked with customers, we've seen the horror behind that foreshadowing. We want to reach out to them just in time to stop them from making that big mistake, stop them from getting that big expensive bill from doing that one thing that we know they shouldn't. And that adds real value because it's just in time to help them avoid the ditch.
The image, the car in the ditch. Friend of the show, Jordan Crawford, always says this, where, if you knew this company was headed for a ditch, just-in-time outreach sounds like, hey, there's a ditch ahead. Do you want to avoid it? I can help you, right? So it's actually different from Princess Leia, right? Princess Leia knows she's in trouble, okay? She knows. She's asking for help. She's like, somebody please help me. That's your low-hanging fruit. Just-in-time outreach is a step below that. You're actually reaching out to them in a conversation or in a comments, and you're saying, hey, I've worked with 13 other, or our company has worked with 13 other Series A companies that just raised their Series B. And the thing every company ran into was problem X. Maybe you sell internal employee communication software. They run into scale problems in keeping all of their teams aligned. Is that worth, are you seeing that already? Like confirm that they are seeing the problem that you have identified. You say, yeah, I mean, one of the things, if they confirm, one of the things we see often is that like hurts productivity, it increases turnover. There's a lot of problems that result with that, and we have a solution for that. Is that worth a chat? That's very different than pitching them, right? You're saying it's just in time. Hey, there's a ditch ahead. Do you want to avoid it?
Short and concise, high value.
So let's review this really quick. The difference between these two pyramids. Traditional sales looks and sounds like and feels like, as a seller, a lot of energy and attention is spent on outreach, followed by your follow-up sequences and then your qualification, right? And demo could be after that. But basically on your day-to-day, you're doing a lot of on my time outreach. You're saying, let's go see who can I get? Who's going to bite, right? Or whatever analogy people use anymore.
Yeah. And all the prospects are going, why are you calling me?
Yeah.
Why are you reaching out to me? Yeah. Because it's not communicated there's a valid reason to be doing so. They're just a suspect. They're not a prospect.
They're just a suspect. Whereas what we've outlined today in the social selling, your box that isn't pictured here today, that informs your whole strategy, are your 3 T's. Your targeting, your timing, and your triggers. Because your targeting informs which accounts you're going to warm up. Your triggers inform which accounts am I going to do just-in-time outreach for, right? And then if your low-hanging fruit prospecting plan, your timing is going to allow you to do direct outreach to your Princess Leia sorts of prospects. You have the ability to do all of this on LinkedIn. But we'll say this before, I know we have about 5 minutes, so we have some concluding thoughts here. The main mistake we see, again, back to the common mistakes, were random acts of social, a lack of focus, and outreach too soon. So if you were to start tomorrow, if you walked away from the session, and we would be very pleased if you said this, and you say, wow, Nick and Morgan are so amazing. I love everything that they said. I want to implement it tomorrow, sort of thing. Okay, that'd be great. We'd love to see you do it. Don't start with the direct outreach thing. Like actually spend the time and attention on just warming up accounts. Now you have the low-hanging fruit strategy we laid out, which is good, and that can get some short-term results. But honestly, spend a couple of weeks constructing your 3 T's, validating them, jumping into conversations, right? If you think not about how can I get results in 30 days or less, but I need to achieve X number of results, you have quota of some kind, in the next 90 days, how can I reverse engineer that? The time invested on the front end to figure out what that large chunk of warmed up accounts should be will reap dividends for years, honestly. Actually, as long as you stay in that job and you're selling to the same ICP, that short investment in figuring out that large chunk and who's supposed to be in there, that's where the magic happens. Nick,
Amen.
How would you like to close out today?
Social selling is taking demand gen and sales and meeting them right in the middle so that you're earning trust and credibility at scale. And really the ultimate goal is it's as if you're working for Microsoft, Gong, GE, really big companies that when you call them, when you reach out to them, they already know who you are and they want to have that conversation. It's really about, it's not pushing. You're not trying to, or you're not forcing anything. Is you're giving yourself enough opportunities to have great conversations. If you notice that you're not hitting target because you don't have enough outreach, add more triggers. Go talk to the other reps. Go and ask them to manually prospect 3 accounts. Watch what they're doing. Turn that into your process of that. Oh, it looks like they're looking for ratios. Oh, they're looking for funding or ranking. That's how they're just naturally doing this. Add those in and start great conversations. Leave the pitch for later and you will always win.
Couldn't have said it better myself, honestly. The thing is about social selling And this is a hard lesson for me to learn. The dirty secret of the trade is that I'm actually not a seller. I'm a marketer.
What? Who knew?
Shh, don't tell anyone. I come from a marketing and branding background, and the hardest thing for me to learn about this whole process was that we are so inclined to try and get attention through social selling. And attention feels good. Attention is great, honestly. Especially if you have a content piece that performs really well, you get a lot of likes. That's so awesome. That's so nice. But attention is actually not the point, right? The point is booking meetings. The point is being able to generate pipeline off of your activities. The point is being able to create conversations, meaningful attention from the right people, from the right prospects. So what we did today, this special thing for modumup, if you're watching, we put together like a how-to guide of some of these things. So it's the same sort of content, and you have access to our slides. You can go to this URL, b2bpowerhour.com/modumup, and we put together this cool little interactive guide. And I apologize, I'm just going to show you guys. I'm just switching screens really quick. Excuse me. So it looks a lot like this. And there's all of the things about how, and yes, we added some GIFs because it's fun and we're supposed to have fun in social selling. So there's, what are the different kinds of comments that you can add? Here's vampire sales again. How do you transition to DMs? And how do you find the conversations already happening? And so if you click into one of these, there's all of the how-tos. So if you want that, go to that URL. We'd love to have you grab the copy of that for yourselves. And you, of course, have these slides, which is sort of the overall framework. But truly, I just want to say thank you for everyone here today for listening, for your time and attention. It means a lot. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share some of these things with you.
And thank you so much. Just want to go and say it's 2022. Nobody should ever have to suffer in silence. If you guys need help, if you're struggling with your sales or you feel like your management's not supporting you in a way you need, jump in the comments, shoot us each a DM. Anyone here, we're happy to support you. You don't have to do it alone.
As you might imagine, we're on LinkedIn every day. So like our DMs are, I mean, this might be a regretful thing to say, but like our DMs are open. So please feel free to shoot us a DM.
Yeah, thank you so much, Morgan, Nicholas. You are a great team. You have a very dynamic and active presentation together and full of a lot of insights. Thank you for that. Yeah, I really got some interesting ideas, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of time for questions, but we will follow up with some additional questions from our audience. Thank you so much. It was brilliant, and I like this vibe, and I will be joining your streams.
Thank you so much.
Olga. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.